Welcome to For the Long Run, the podcast exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. I'm your host, Jonathan Levitt. I've been running for a few years now and have the privilege of meeting many incredible runners on my travels all across the country. This podcast is intended to share those amazing conversations.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Forget the frustration of picking commerce platforms when you switch your business to Shopify, the global commerce platform that supercharges your selling wherever you sell. With Shopify, you'll harness the same intuitive features, trusted apps, and powerful analytics used by the world's leading brands. Sign up today for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/tech, all lowercase. That's shopify.com/tech.
Welcome back. I am here in Austin, Texas with Amelia Boone. Amelia, thanks for joining today.
Thanks for having me. I'm so happy we can finally do this.
For sure. What's this, like the 14th time we've tried to meet up?
I know. So you say, "Oh, I'm going to be in the Bay Area." I'm like, "Oh, I'm not right now. I'm flying out exactly as you're coming in."
I always thought you've been avoiding me, so I guess here we are, proof that that's not the case. So
very true.
Thanks for chatting today.
Absolutely.
You're wearing an incredible flamingo
Yeah,
suit.
this is the only time that I wish that this podcast had a YouTube component to it, because I am in a gooder flamingo suit right now.
We'll take a photo and show the fans.
Here we go.
So first question, we'll kick it off with a tough one. Who is Amelia Boone?
Oh, God. How do I describe myself?
That's the $1 million question.
I know. Well, it's funny because people always say, they're like, how do you introduce yourself? Do you say that you're an attorney? Do you say that you're an athlete? And I go, it really depends on who I'm introducing myself to. But yeah, I mean, I guess I always say I'm like, I am an attorney, and then I do stupid races on the side. But that's me in
Legal
a nutshell.
disclaimer.
That's, yeah, exactly.
So stupid races on the side. Why?
It's $1 million question, right? I think it is kind of the thing that any athlete is like, why do we do what we do? And, I think I got into, so, I mean, I got into obstacle racing, back when it first started 10 years ago, which feels like forever ago, but
it's
clearly
a 10-year challenge.
Right. God. And I think it was for me at that time, I was a first year associate at a law firm, and I was like, what do I do now? I'd done everything in life. Like I was like graduating up the ranks of going to law school and then getting the best firm. And then I looked around and I was like, okay, what's the next challenge? So I kind of found this athletic outlet side of me, and then I happened to be pretty good at it. and then I kept doing it.
Cool. So that's the start. And in that time, you've run some very long distances. You just crossed 100 miles for the first time a couple of weeks ago. What was it like? What was that like, going that far on your feet?
Yeah, that was interesting for me because people had always assumed that I had run like 100-miler before. And I go, no, I've run 24-hour races. They all had like obstacles. So right. I had run 90 miles with like 300 and something obstacles.
So as one does.
Yeah, exactly. And I'd done longer type of like adventure race type of things. So I'd been on my feet for 48, 72 hours. But running the first 100 miles at Biggs was kind of strange in a way because of the way the format is with like this.
So do you want to explain that?
Yeah. So Biggs Backyard Ultra, you run a 4.16 mile loop every hour on the hour until you drop out, and then there's one person left standing. And Maggie clearly won with 250 miles, which is incredible. But so I was the only person on the start line who had never run a 100-miler before. And I looked around and I was like, oh, why am I even in this race right now? I'd never run 100 miles. But it was to me, it was very special. And it was really cool because by the time you're running for 24 hours with all these people and like going at the same pace. And so you spend a lot of time chatting. And so they all made this like tunnel for me to like cross through when I hit cool. on. Yeah, it was pretty cool because it was just such like a people cheering me on, and it was a fun experience.
That's awesome. So what is it? I remember something in your Instagram or Twitter bio at some point, like something about along the lines of like, I run crazy long distances and have no toenails, or like something like that. So what is it about like beyond the marathon or beyond the 50 mile that gets you excited?
For me, it's always been about, it's the mental challenge. It's the mental component and the triaging of things going wrong.
Where does that come from? Where's the interest from?
I think it's what I've always found is that like I pure physical ability, I'm totally impressed by. But for me, just that trying to piece things together when things are going wrong and trying to problem solve. And maybe a part of it is kind of like what attracts me to be an attorney as well, is like problem solving and fixing those problems and when things are falling apart, like, and how do you get them back together? And it's just that intangible quality that just kind of draws me in. And it really forces me to use my body and my mind. And so like you have to be on and constantly thinking. And I think that about long distances and about races where there's like a lot of unknown elements is something that, it just appeals to me, because it is so much more than just running as fast as you can,
right,
which is a different type of talent, one that I don't have, but is like extremely impressive in other ways, but one that just doesn't grab me, I think.
So the point of this podcast, or what I have in my bio, is exploring the why behind what keeps runners running long, strong, and motivated. So is discovering your why something you've actively thought about? I mean, I feel like you have to have this great reason to decide to run for 24 hours or 48 hours. Is it that self-discovery of like, where does my mind go at that time? And I'll preface that by saying like, I love that answer if that's the answer. I was so excited to run the Grand Canyon because I was like, I've never been in like a super deep hole and seen what happens. And so I ran for 38 miles. I felt amazing. And I was like, this isn't sustainable. I won't feel good for the whole thing. And I can't wait. And the last 7 miles was like fascinating, like where my head went and how I got out of it. So what's your why? What's the reason that you keep signing up for these races? It's
funny because I think that it actually has morphed over time. I'll be totally honest. When I first started racing, it was winning.
Yeah.
My why was winning. And I'll take that back. When I like the first few races, it was like pure shits and giggles and fun.
Exploration.
And like, this is so random and new and yay. But then I got caught up in this, oh, well, I'm good at this and I'm winning. And I have to keep running because I have to keep winning. And if I don't win, then no one's going to like me. And like, I'm not going to be relevant. And like, how are people going to love me if I'm not winning? And what's I'm going to disappoint everybody? And so the motivation became, I started to really resent racing too, because it wasn't, when I crossed the finish line, it wasn't this pure like elation.
Right.
It was like a relief of, oh, thank God I didn't lose.
Yeah.
And that to me, was almost enough to make me want to like step back from all of it and step back from the running. And I guess fortunately, getting injured, of my string of injuries and things like that have kept me sidelined, forced me to actually like reformulate my relationship with it and to kind of understand why I do this. And what I've realized is that it's the experience. It's the memories. It's why we're out there. It's the strange things that happen in the middle of the night and that, you're experiencing out there with other people who are like going through ups and downs and like puking on the side of the trail. And those are the things. it is to me, like, I think long races 100Ks, 100 milers, multi-day stuff is kind of almost a microcosm of life in some ways. And you go through those ups and downs, but you just do it in this like controlled environment and like weird things.
24 hours.
In 24 hours when you're like, like puking on the side of the trail and like, eating gels and weird things, everything going on. But it's like this microcosm of life. And I love that. And you see such incredible things out there. You meet such incredible people. And for me, I've realized that it's really just being out there in the arena is what's really important to me.
That's
and
awesome.
It's almost not so much about like what happens at the end of the race, even if I finish the race.
Yeah.
It's more about
what happens along the way. So I've known you for a few years now, and I feel like, and I've told you this, like I feel like you've changed a lot in the last few years.
Hopefully in a good way. Yeah.
Definitely in a good way. And it's been really cool to watch this evolution of like Amelia must win to like Amelia must have fun and like smile and enjoy the process along the way. So how did you get there? Because I think a lot of people struggle with that. And I did too. Like I was so caught up in breaking 3 hours in the marathon that like I wore myself out, and I didn't run a road marathon for 2 years because I was so tied to the time on the watch. And it's not winning,
right?
But my measure of success was, did my time get faster? Very objective goal that somebody else set that allows me to do something else. Winning is a very objective goal that you don't necessarily have all of the control over. You could show up to a race that has the best athletes in the world, or you could show up to the race that has no competitors. You don't control that. You do control the process and the journey along the way. So how did you get from point A to point B?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that what's funny is I feel like I've done kind of this pendulum thing, is that so initially in like Amelia 1.0 version, it was win, 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 win.
All I do is win.
All I do is win, or want to win. And then
you were, and that's the thing.
Yeah, and I was, but I was like miserable. I was crying before races. I was so petrified of what was happening.
Did that raise any flags at the time? Or do you think that was normal?
Because I didn't have like not a professional background, but I didn't compete in college. I didn't play. It wasn't.
You weren't on a team.
I wasn't on a team, so I didn't have any of like that background. So I didn't really know if that was normal or not. But I kept thinking that it would change eventually. I kept thinking like, oh no, like eventually, like. But I remember thinking that I can't wait to like win a race and then just hang my hat up and walk away. Because I remember after winning World's Toughest Mudder for the third time in 2015, I told myself, I'm like, maybe I should just retire and go out on top. And then I don't ever have to have the pressure of winning again and just be a huge weight off. And then what happened was then I was training then for Western States, and I ended up with a stress fracture in my femur, and then ended up right after that with a stress fracture in my sacrum. And I was sidelined for a good 9 months. And so what happened was I then like pendulum swung to Amelia 2.0, was like, I don't care about any type of results. I just want to run. And it was this entire race happy, and I'm just for fun. And so I like overcorrected, I think. And then in this past year or so, I've kind of realized that I can find this happy balance in this medium where I can still I have a competitive fire.
Good.
Like I do.
Cool.
And I want to, I still want to win. I still want to do well. I still want to compete and go hard. But I recognize that it's not so much about that objective, that it's more about that like value of challenge for me, and that in finding those challenges and going after them, but then realizing when I fall short of what those goals may be, quote unquote, that's fine, and so it has been kind of this learning process for me where I'm like swinging back and forth from extremes. And now I feel like I'm settling into this kind of happy middle. But we'll see.
Cool. Do you feel like people need to would you call that rock bottom?
I think it's a rock bottom in in a certain type of way, in that it's where where you're completely disillusioned with things, when you like want to walk away and you're broken down and you need a change. And I think for me, it was more that I I never wanted to completely like walk away from sport. It was just, I needed a different outlet. I needed to do something besides obstacle racing. And that's what initially I was like, oh, I can go run trail races, you know, and people don't know me and I can do this in like in a different way and find a different challenge. And I think that injects new life into what you're doing, you know, gives you fresh perspective.
Who were some of your mentors as you transitioned onto the trails?
You know, I have to say, I don't think I give her as much credit as I should, but when I moved to the Bay Area, Devin Yanko reached out to me and like took me under her wing, and like I remember
she's the best.
She is amazing, and I love her to death. And I went up to Marin and ran with her, and I was like, holy crap, she's really fast, and I can't. And I think she was really like kind of the first person in the trail community to kind of like welcome me in. And then we ended up running Sean O'Brien together in 2016. And by together, I mean, she ran like 40 minutes ahead of me. That was really, really meaningful to me. And then it was kind of like slowly then introducing to other people. And then our coach, mutual coach, David Roche, like I literally ran into him on the trails in where we live in San Jose and Rancho San Antonio. And that's how I connected with him. And then I think that just, it was a very welcoming environment to me. And I really appreciated that.
Cool. Let's talk about the year you've had in 2019.
That was a doozy.
It was a doozy, wasn't it? In a
different kind of way, yeah.
So we started talking about, or you shared with me probably in January, at the beginning of the year, that you were seeking some help. And let's talk about that.
Yeah, you were actually one of the few. I didn't tell that many people. I told very few people what I was doing and where I was going. And I really appreciate that you held that in confidence for a very long time. So, until I was ready to tell the broader world. But yeah, you know, I, as many listeners may know, I recently spoke about how I was diagnosed with anorexia when I was 15, or 16, I guess. Yeah, sometime around that.
Teenager.
I was like, how old am I? Yeah. And it's been something that has kind of been ebbing and flowing in terms of how I've been dealing with it for the past 20 years. And then finally, I think I reached a point where I was just kind of tired of it still being a monkey on my back, is what I called it.
What was the breaking point?
I had a few breaking points. And I don't think you have to hit rock bottom to like seek treatment. But it was kind of a slow burn. I mean, there definitely, the multiple stress fractures were a huge warning flag to me that there was something going on in my body, that I was not feeding it properly and that things were breaking down. Having the calcaneal stress fracture like 2 weeks before Barkley this year was definitely a low point. At that point, I was already going into treatment. My plan was to run Barkley and then go into treatment. And this just was a signal that, okay, this is the right decision, Amelia. This is the right decision.
Yeah. Okay, universe, I get it.
Yeah. It's like, you can hit me over the head one more time. Yeah. I got it. But
point taken. Yeah.
Honestly, it was more, I remember the holidays last year and being a complete basket case around my family and around food and not being able to enjoy what was going on. And it was more that there were things in a relationship that ended, and knowing that like I couldn't even go out on dates with people because I was petrified to eat in front of somebody. And that wasn't a way I wanted to live anymore. So there was definitely, it was the injuries that were keeping me from doing what I loved. But more than that, it was just my life felt like a hollow shell. And I wanted to be able to fully engage with it again.
So where did you turn? How did you find the help that
Google?
Yeah.
No, it is kind of a funny thing because I think that for anybody struggling with or wanting to seek therapy, wanting to seek treatment, there's not like a roadmap for it. I think a lot of people just like turn to Google, like eating disorder treatment near San Jose, you know, or
Like
things
Google
like that.
AdWords pop up and like whoever's spending money on
Right.
Yeah, it's like not necessarily the best.
Or it's like, how do you even find, I remember like dabbling around and like trying to find therapists in the area and like who even takes insurance anymore.
Yeah.
And it wasn't super, you know, wasn't super clear. And I actually, what turned me on, I went to Opal Food and Body in Seattle, and, it was a runner, Hannah Fields, who last year came out about how she went into treatment at Opal, and she ran for Brooks Beast. And that's how it kind of got on my radar. And then I started looking at programs like, oh, they have eating disorder programs that are like, have like kind of an athlete focus and an athlete bent, which was new to me. Because when I first went through treatment 20 years ago, there was none of that. I mean, and it was like hospital style treatment when I was 15, 16. It wasn't what they have now. But it took several months of me kind of poking around and talking to places and figuring out what would be the best fit, to figure out where to turn. And I remember thinking when I spoke to Opal and they're like, yeah, and we want you, you know, it's a 10 hours a day, all your meals there, everything like that. I was like, I don't think I need that much, you know, I was like, are you sure? Kind of like start lower level. But I also knew myself that I needed to go full in. Just know that like a lot of it was like, I needed to go the highest level that I could, and then, you know, face all those and then kind of step down from that.
What advice do you have for someone who might be struggling?
Yeah. I think number one, the first step is to start reaching out, to start making phone calls. Honestly, the hardest thing that I did was like the first phone call that I made and saying like, I think I need treatment. And then just put the wheels in motion. And it gets easier as I found, as I started to tell more people and as I started to talk about it more. And luckily now it feels like in this past like year or two, there's been kind of this seismic shift in more and more people talking about mental health issues and talking about taking care of yourself. And I love that. And so I think that, you know, you don't have to, I tell everyone, I'm like, oh, I've aired my dirty laundry for like everyone in the world to know. And you don't have to do that. You know, there are people like you can do everything completely privately, but I do firmly believe that the more that you bring people in, even if it's just a few, you know, people around you to like help and support you, then that is so key. Because any type of mental illness is going to thrive in darkness. It's going to thrive in silence. And so when you like keep bringing that out, then it's much harder for that disorder to thrive.
That's amazing. Do you feel like you have a responsibility to be public with things like this?
I don't think it's necessarily responsibility. But I do realize that I'm fortunate to have a platform, and I know that so many people that struggle with mental illness, struggle with eating disorders, they have like, there are so many stories out there like mine, like it's so many. And the number of people that have reached out to me, and I feel bad because I haven't responded to all of them. But the number of people that reached out to me and like been like, I feel you, I've been there, this is my thing. I don't have the same platform that you have to blah, blah, blah. And so I understand that like I'm fortunate and that I can give voice to all of those stories and all of those people that are going through this, and recognizing like, hey, we're not alone in this at all.
Totally. It's wild how many people are also going through something similar. Like I posted on Instagram a few weeks ago, like a photo from my therapist's office. Yeah. And I don't have nearly as large of an audience. I have like 6,000 followers, and 50 people replied saying that they see a therapist too. That's 50 out of 6,000. That,
I'm sure there's way more than that.
That to talk about it. Yeah. So I'm guessing that number is, you know, astronomical compared, and you know, only 800 people see my story. So that's 50 out of 800, which is probably 400 out of 800 that are actually doing it. And it's so cool that like it's commonplace, but it's not being talked about or not yet.
Well, and I think there's also this aspect to it that a lot of people said like, oh, I saw you as this kind of invincible, perfect person,
Unicorn.
that like, she could be
Your life
an
looks
attorney
great.
and your life looks amazing. And I'm like, no, no one's life is amazing.
I deal with shit too. Yeah.
Yeah. And we all do. And that's the thing. And so, I'm guilty of it too, is that I see other people and I'm like, oh, I think they have a perfect life. And it seems like they have everything in order and blah, blah. They have beautiful kids and a dog and a loving husband. And I don't have any of that. Like underneath all of that, there's always stuff. And so for me, it was just really like, I finally feel like I am myself again. Because I think for a long time, I kind of took on a persona that I don't know if it was necessarily thrust upon me or I brought it upon myself, but didn't really resonate with me, and how I was feeling internally.
And what was that persona?
It was that idea of like, oh, the queen of pain. And like, she's so badass and she can do hard things. And I always hated the word badass. And I'm like, no, like internally, like I'm breaking down. Like I am a miserable, miserable mess. And like, but everyone thinks like that it's just like super badass. No, that's not how I feel. I feel like this little 6-year-old like crying in a ball somewhere, So, like reconciling that like internal feeling versus what was external facing was really hard for me.
So 2016, 2017 was an interesting time for you and our friend Caroline Burkle and myself.
Yeah.
And we went through like of different magnitudes, like shit.
Yeah.
And it was incredible to witness the ups and downs. And the three of us had some highs together and some lows together, again, at varying levels. And I think the three of us found it like therapeutic to like air it out on social media. I know Caroline was doing Instagram stories every day with like her diary, like her self diary. So first, who is she? How did you guys get connected? Let's let the audience in on this.
So Caroline Burkle is like my best friend for life. And we met actually at a Mind Body Green conference in 2015 when I was speaking there. And I think we were like the only two people that weren't like the big yoga people. And so we're like, oh, okay, let's like congregate together and like go for a run because I can't like do all these yoga poses that all these other people can do. But yeah, so she's an Olympic swimmer. And we just hit it off. And I think that she has a very artsy brain and I'm a very logical person. And so our brains operate in totally different ways, but it works really well. And then, let's see. And then we met you at the North Face 50 in 2016.
I think so.
Was that it? Yeah. But we didn't really meet you. We saw your socks. And I was
my favorite story ever.
Taco socks. And I had like known you, like I knew your name because of Inside Tracker, because of Spartan. But yeah, so it was just like this weird confluence. And then Rest Day Brag started. And I think for me, it was very therapeutic, the idea that, because I was really struggling at that time because it was injured. And everyone around there is posting these amazing pictures of their like 20-mile runs and like, oh, my long days in the mountains. And I was like, everyone is bragging about like kicking ass and doing all these hardcore things. Like, why don't we brag about taking rest? And I think that what we kind of created there was actually it was a lot of therapy for me. And actually I needed support in order to be able to take rest.
And it sort of normalized it.
Yeah. And you felt like, okay, I'm not alone. Like it's okay. And I think that for a lot of, if people aren't, endurance athletes, then they're like, "What? I need motivation. Get off the couch." And I'm like, "But we're all the weirdos that like rest days are really hard for us."
I mean, I love the people that like reply on Twitter, like, "Oh my God, are you kidding me? I need to like I need to run. That's not my problem.
And I'm like, and I get it. Like, and I totally get it. It is a very, it's a small minority of the population, but it's more commonplace than we think.
Right.
There are people like, I don't know, like they go out of their minds on a rest day. And what's funny, I actually think is through that process, like rest days don't faze me at all anymore.
Yeah.
Or if like, and I have an like extra unplanned one because I'm traveling or like it just doesn't get around to it. I'm like, meh. Life goes on.
Life goes on, yeah.
I didn't get out of shape. Actually, I probably am in better shape now because I'm actually absorbing all of my training.
Right.
But yeah.
Well, that's awesome. The taco sock story is my favorite.
Right.
It's like tacos bring people together.
They do. Anything can be a taco. What is it? I think I saw a show. It was like
if they just believe.
If they just believe, right.
and then so that was amazing. And then that hashtag has been used over 5,000 times.
That's incredible. And I think, didn't we see it in was it a Saucony?
It was a Saucony ad.
Something like
that.
Yeah,
Saucony, Wazelle has used it.
I know. I was like, God, I should have trademarked.
Yeah, and then the corporate attorney here didn't advise us on the right thing, and we could have been making millions.
Yeah, never planned on monetizing that.
We could have had royalties every time the hashtag was used. We get $1.
I know.
So, 2020. Let's look ahead. What is keeping you excited and fired up?
There are so many things keeping me excited and fired up. It's funny because I think every year I go and I'm like, okay, that was a crappy year. This year gonna be the best year ever. And then it never goes as planned.
And I think that's a lesson in itself.
Yeah.
Like, deal with the shit, and eventually something else happens.
Oh, absolutely. And I think like 2018, I remember the end of 2018, I was coming off of a metatarsal fracture and I was like, 2019 going to be the best year ever. And then I broke my heel and then I went to eating disorder treatment. But I do have to say, if I look back on 2019, I will say it was hands down probably the best year that I've had in a long time for very different reasons.
Would Amelia of 2012 believe that this is who Amelia of 2019 is?
Absolutely not. No, because I think that at that point, I was just like, win, and then I probably would think at this point I would have like walked away on top and then like never competing again. But I've realized, because I told myself, I'm like, I don't want to be that person that still competes when I'm no longer like at top.
Yeah.
That was what I told myself when I was, like 10 years ago. Like I don't want to be that person like hanging on. And now I'm like, no, you know what? You know what I respect? People who will compete until they're 80, 90 years old just because they love to compete. And that's what I want to be, And I'm like,
that's the goal.
That's the goal. The goal is longevity. The goal is the fact that I am so excited to run like any and every race, or not even a race, just like experiences and being out there in the woods and whatever, that like that keeps me going. Like, and I've gotten to this point where like, I don't care about like, yes, I mean, I care about competing and I'd like to do well, but this is no longer going to define me. And so it's really just that longevity and figuring out how to do that. And I feel I'm optimistic and hopeful that I'm like in a good spot to be able to do that. Knock on wood. I only have glass around me.
Don't throw stones in this glass.
I know, right? So 2020 is like just kind of it's like an open book. I have to kind of figure out exactly where I want to go with it. But clearly, I mean, right now it's figuring out like, will I get back into Barkley when I apply to that? And then if not, there's tons of cool things that I can do. If I do, then that will be my focus, but we'll see.
Normally I like to ask people, what do you wish you knew when you started running that you know today? But I feel like we've covered that.
I was like,
have you been listening?
A lot of things. I mean, that's been my entire past 10 years are those learning those lessons in a very public way.
For sure. So, what are some of the things that you wish people knew about you?
Interesting. The funny thing is now I feel like I've told like everything, like everyone knows everything about me.
People are like, I play piano or like something.
I know. I was a 5th grade jump rope champion. I will actually.
That's when the winning started.
Oh, I know. Oh, I was a phenomenal jump roper. I was that kid that would go in with like into the double dutch, and I would take a pogo ball and a rope inside the double dutch. I would like to say that that's why I had strong Achilles. Knock on wood. Now I'm gonna like injure my Achilles. Watch, I just totally jinxed myself.
We can edit that part out. Nobody will ever hear it.
I know, right? But yeah, no, I don't know. I feel like I've gotten to a point where I just like blather everything about my life. So I feel like everybody kind of knows everything about me.
Cool. Let's talk about balance. You have,
what's that?
Yeah, exactly. You have a full-time job. Mm-hmm. You're a full-time athlete. You've talked a lot about the challenges of both and how you learned that you can't push as hard as other athletes that don't have full-time jobs or desk jobs.
Yeah.
How do you rectify that? How do you, there are a lot of people that listen to this podcast that train hard and have full-time jobs. I know we talked a bit in the past about some of the tips you have around that. Let's hear that.
Yeah, I think what was hard for me when I first started all of this, I thought, I'm like, oh, I have the perfect setup because like I have a desk job, so I can like run really hard and then I'm just recovering all day as I'm like not doing anything. And
with an easy law job.
It's an easy law job. But then what I realized is actually that is the worst formula ever. Is like you train super hard in the mornings and then you sit really hard the rest of the day and like then your body just feels awful. And so, there are things that you can do like the sit stand desks and whatnot, but I've just kind of realized that as we've talked about it and you've talked about it, like stress is stress. And so whether it's emotional stress, whether it's stress from your job, whether it's mental stress, it all adds up. And so like I've come to terms with the fact, like I'm not going to be a 100-mile-a-week person. My body probably isn't durable enough for that. As much as I would love to be out in the mountains doing that all the time, it's just not feasible with my work. It's not feasible with my like physical, probably composition in terms of the durability right now. And I think that's okay. I think that people, that 99% of us out there are weekend warriors. And I am a weekend warrior along with everyone else. And you have to recognize that you can't necessarily train like a professional athlete because you're not doing all the little things that they're doing every single day to keep themselves healthy and ready to go for their 2-a-days and things like that. But in all honesty, I've kind of gotten to the point where it doesn't really faze me anymore that I'm like, oh, I can't train like that. That's cool. It's just an extra little wrinkle and challenge. And like, how can I fit this all in? And like I was talking about how races to me are puzzles. That's the same thing with being working full time and then doing the athlete portion is like a fun little puzzle to make fit.
Awesome. Morning gratitude.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
So morning gratitude, actually, I have to shout out to Matt Davis, who's the host of Obstacle Racing Media. And he started it, he and his wife, about a little over a year ago. And they just started an Instagram account that was morning gratitude. It was 10 things a day that you are grateful for. And I remember it was around Thanksgiving of last year and I was in a really rough spot. I had a metatarsal that wasn't healing. Was miserable. And so I told myself, I'm like, every morning I'm going to do this. And 10 things a day is actually really difficult.
Because you get the like family and health and this and that. And like, that's day one.
Right. And then you're like, oh, wait. And then I'm doing this. And what's funny is the number of people that reach out to me and they're like, is it okay if I only do 3 things a day? Or can I do it in the evenings? I'm like, you can't do gratitude wrong. Like pick what works for you. Like if you look at Burko's gratitude, sometimes she like draws pictures, Yeah. I mean, that's just how her brain works. But it has been a really good practice for me. And I repeat a lot of things, but I tell myself, I look back over my past 24 hours and I go, in these past 24 hours, like, what am I super thankful for? Like in this morning, it was like, being able to run with like so many folks that are like being able to put names to faces that like I've that like don't know in real life, and you meet everybody here at TRE, and then you're like, oh, yay. Or making good associations with a place that I previously had negative associations with. So it's those little things that I just kind of like keep stock of.
And I think your best social media post ever came as a result of morning gratitude, because you only write it on one side of the page.
Oh my God. Yes.
And so I want to ask about trolls. So
trolls are my favorite.
So first, so Amelia writes her morning gratitude on one piece of paper in a notebook, and somebody commented saying, you're killing the environment.
Oh, and it wasn't just it was like and that's what people are like, this is an overreaction of one person commenting. I go, no, I got probably at least 50 messages from people telling me that I was killing the environment. And the funny thing is all these notebooks that I use are like freebies that I get from conferences, and so I'm like, it's not right.
You're not buying them.
I'm not buying them. And paper is recyclable, people. It is by definition a sustainable resource.
You should be doing it on your iPhone and Notepad.
So, and that's what I've learned through 99% of people on social media are amazing. And we met through social media, and it's an amazing tool. But the downside is you are going to get people that are going to pick apart whatever you do. And then I decided to troll my trolls, which is not easy for me because I do like being a nice person, but it was a nice, fun little 24 hours.
I saw this and by the first post, I thought you were serious. And by the second one, I was like, oh, she's good. And by the fifth one, I was like, oh, damn, this is hilarious. So what were you talking about? What were you saying?
Oh, I just decided that everything. So for instance, I was washing my wetsuits after World's Toughest Mudder. And so I was like, but don't worry, people. I use a biodegradable soap, and then I'm going to save the dirt to make a facial mask. And then
you were about to fly home, but you decided to ditch the plane.
I was going to bike home from San Jose to Portland, but it was okay. I was going to miss Thanksgiving, but I was going to be there in time for Christmas. So you keep things lighthearted, and I actually do have maybe this some people don't, I do have a very sarcastic and biting personality. And I'm afraid to let it out sometimes.
There's no sarcasm font on Instagram.
I know.
That's
and I'm
the
afraid to
problem.
let it out sometimes because I'm afraid people will think that I'm like mean or cruel or not. And I'm like, no, sometimes I just like being a dick.
We get it sometimes on Twitter though.
Yeah. I actually get to do it way more on Twitter, and I don't know why. It's funny how I have different personalities on different sides. So
a quote that I attribute to you, and hopefully you can confirm that it's actually you that says it, is no matter what, 10% of people will disagree with you. Mm-hmm. And as your audience grows, that 10% stays 10%, but it gets bigger. Mm-hmm. Was that you that said that?
I did not say that.
Oh, okay.
But
a lot of people think you did.
That's
sorry.
That's amazing. I think I probably stole it from somebody else. I actually think but I mean, it was something that I heard somewhere. And so it's very much understanding that you can't and you're not going to please everyone, but it is our human nature that we're going to fixate on those few negative voices there, And I remember the first time I heard somebody talk about how I'm awful to listen to on podcasts because I have a vocal fry. And I didn't even know what a vocal fry was.
What is a vocal fry?
It's like oh my God, Valley Girl. And it's I guess I had to look it up.
Flamingo suit.
Right. Or it's like, I can't believe that trail off. And I go, I didn't even know that was a thing. And then you're going to become super self-conscious of it. And I'm like, oh man, I can't listen to myself talk. But yeah, I mean, it's understanding that I'm not going to be perfect at everything. And I think
give
that's
yourself
tough.
That grace.
Yeah. But it's a work in progress for me because I still will see, a few months ago, somebody commented on a picture and was like, you're chubby. And I was like, wait. You are saying that to a girl who just got out of eating disorder treatment. Like, really?
Do you have a soul?
And I wanted to be like, and that didn't faze me at all, but it did in the back of my mind. So I'm still working on it. Yeah.
So you've done all these incredible things. You run through the night. You do, wild obstacles, jumping into cold, icy things. You
really
don't
stupid things.
Toenails. You
get electrocuted.
Jump through fire.
Yes.
Burpees in the mud. What are you scared of?
Fish.
Fish.
I mean,
Fish.
actually, I do have
And
fear of
nuts.
Fish and nuts will kill me. Fish could kill me too. I have a fish phobia.
Like salmon and tuna and like.
Oh, just any like aquariums, fish tanks
Oh,
are
so
my
like
worst
the little
nightmare.
little ones,
or a big one. The little one's not so bad, but like going to Hawaii
like
to
a koi pond.
Oh God, no. Or like, people are like, let's go snorkeling in Hawaii. I'm like, hard pass. That's your goal is to see the fish. My goal is to not see the fish. So I do have a fear of fish, but on a more serious note, I think that one of my things that I've always had a fear, and I think this is very true of many people, is loneliness. And is being alone. And I think for a very long time, I was like, oh God, okay, I'm like 36 years old. If I don't have a partner for the rest of my life, I'm going to be alone. What I've realized actually in the past few years, like I'm actually never afraid of being alone because like there is such a community out there. And like, regardless of like, it doesn't have to be in a traditional like partner scenario that we think of or whatnot. Like, but like, I'm all about like when we're all 7 years old and like a bunch of like outdoorsy folk, like, just starting a big commune together and like, let's all hang out and like live in this big house and like, I'll go run these trails together.
Where's the house?
Oh God, name.
That's your $1 million question.
I know there's so many places. I want a house in Utah. I want a house in Colorado. I want a house in Tahoe, like everywhere. But
so it'll have to be a timeshare.
Yeah, the timeshares are awful investments. Don't ever do those. I haven't done one, but I've heard.
But it's a timeshare with friends. So everybody has a house in a different place, and then you just trade.
Right. And then we just
places.
like roll around,
So I want to talk about the sponsored athlete
Yeah.
part of it. So you have a full-time job and you work with a bunch of brands. Not a bunch, a handful of brands.
A fair number of brands.
A fair number of brands.
Because I like the people.
Yeah, exactly. So
fun.
It's, business is personal. How do you do that while staying authentic to yourself, while getting the products and services that you need? And I know we've talked a lot about like Black Friday and staying true to what you use and believe in, and you don't want to be a billboard and things like that. So how do you go about social media from the point of not being a salesperson, but needing to represent brands that are supporting you?
Yeah, this is my $1 million question. This is something that I wrestle with all the time because I work with great brands, and they, they provide support for me. And so you think like in response, like you provide support for them. And over the past few years and with social media, it seems I always wonder, like, what were athlete sponsor obligations before social media?
To win.
Yeah. It was no like post about our sale
Right.
or like things. I mean, there was nothing like that. So it's tough because I love these brands. I use them. I support them. They support me. But you can spot a sponsored post by
Right.
1,000 miles away. And I think people see through that, and it's like, oh, okay, great. That athlete needs to throw that up there right now. So for me, it's been great. I always approach brands with a very like, and maybe this helps because I'm an attorney and I tell them, this is what I will do and this is what I will not do. I'm not going to put in a contract that I'm going to post X number of times for you in doing this, because I'm not comfortable for that. It's like, so how can we think of a way, how can we work together in a creative way where we can support each other, but it's not necessarily me just like, here's a picture of me in a tub of protein powder, and doing something in that regard. And it's still something that I'm trying to like work through and figure out. And I think that every athlete just kind of needs to ask, like, what is their tolerance for that? And if you're totally cool, like, posting X number of times on social media per month for the brand, great. You do you. If that feels inauthentic to you, then come up with other ways. I've talked to, with Beat Elite that I work with, it's like, okay, we're going to do some like TV spots, or we're going to make videos that then can be like pushed through Facebook and whatnot. So it's not necessarily like me feeling like a salesperson. So that's my biggest thing, is that I think athletes need to understand that they have they have more power than you think. Like, and don't just bend over because a brand says this is how we do it. You either A, need to find a different brand to work with, or B, need to push back and be like, is there a better way that we can think about this? You know, is there an alternative? I like to write. Can I write a blog post for you? And things along those lines.
Cool. Yeah, I asked Jesse Thomas the same question, and he was like, look, I'm like a main marketing driver of picky bars.
Yeah.
I have to post. And I have to get creative because people will stop following me if I just post about picky bars all the time.
Right.
So he's like, I got to get creative. Like I ran a 5K as a barosaurus.
That's a deflated barosaurus.
A deflated barosaurus. A fast deflated barosaurus.
I know. I couldn't. That was my actually, that was my reason for not running the 5K this morning.
You didn't want to lose to a barosaurus?
I didn't want to lose to a guy in a dinosaur costume.
It wasn't the wrath of David. It was
no. It wasn't being scared of my coach being like, "You ran a what?"
You didn't want to lose to a deflated barosaurus with some weird legs.
Yes. Pretty much.
Yeah, so he was saying like you got to get creative and do stuff like that, and he said he ran in a picky bars outfit up for a KOM and stuff like that, and I think that 2 or 3 years ago, like putting up an Instagram with like, hey, this is the best thing ever, like worked, but now we're beyond that. Yeah,
and people see through that, and I think that if anything, my challenge to brands is to realize that people. I always say when I decide to work with a company, I have like a good people test is that I'm like, it's mainly about like, are these people that I'd like want to hang out with, that I trust and believe in, and that I use their products. And so it's building that trust that then other people that see you as an athlete, like you don't have to be constantly pushing it in their face. But if you just even the association, it's like, oh, well, I like that athlete. That athlete works with that brand. I trust that athlete that's a good brand, and I think that that's the best kind of like symbiotic type of relationship.
For sure. So speaking of social media, where can we find you on social media?
Everywhere.
Yeah.
Instagram, ARBoone11, because I got an Instagram late and Amelia Boone was taken.
Have you ever tried offering something to Amelia Boone?
I don't even know. I should check to see. I think it's like an inactive handle almost.
It's a shame you can't like dethrone.
Well, and so now Twitter is apparently going to go through and get rid of old inactive handles. And so I wonder maybe Instagram will do the same thing at some point. But now I'm like, would that be weird if I change my handle at this point? But it would be easier because people are like ARBoone11. I'm like, I know. Twitter, I am at Amelia Boone. I did get onto Twitter early. And then I have a website, AmeliaBooneRacing.com, that I still need to update, but
And your blog on there is great.
Thank you.
People should definitely check that out.
I have a lot more blogs coming because it's kind of off season. So I have a lot of more time to write.
Awesome. Well, Amelia, thank you so much for joining in. Yeah. I'm glad we could finally make this happen. And
yeah, absolutely.
I won't see you in California soon.
Right.
That's it for today's episode. Like many long runs, it's sad when it has to end. I hope you join in next week on For the Long Run. And in the meantime, happy trails. If you've enjoyed this episode, it would mean a lot to me if you shared it so that others can find it and enjoy it too.